Cheers. Good afternoon, folks. My name, as Sean said, is Bob McCormack. I'm delighted to be here in the kingdom of Kerry. I'm going to hopefully challenge some of you with some of what I'm about to say, because that's the nature of experiential learning. And I'm going to try and involve you a little bit if I can. Not necessarily ideal, but I'll try to. Now, this feels like a Manchester United supporters club kind of get-together at this stage. This slide was submitted well in advance of last night's injustice. So I just want to highlight, I am the person on the right, and that is a Manchester United player, former player. I have fan up at the top because that kind of goes back to the value side of things. This guy is Jesper Olsen, a Danish footballer, used to play at Manchester United. And here I am, a wide-eyed 11-year-old, fulfilling a massive dream to be over in Old Trafford. Well, actually, this is at the training ground. So I'm a massive fan of Manchester United, but not half as much as I'm a fan of development education. And I have to say, I suppose the value of education, I think, is very much understated and not appreciated enough. And I think partially by the development sector in Ireland and partially by the international development sector in various countries. I don't think its potential is recognised enough, and I'm going to explain a little bit as to why. I think it would be fair enough to say, though, instead of looking at, criticising others, again going back to reflecting on ourselves, if we talk about the quality or the value of development education, I think it's important to look at, well, what can improve the quality or what can improve the value of development education? And that's the side of the equation that I'm going to concentrate on. How can we improve what we do by, if you like, investing in things that we know works? I'd like, if you don't mind, to put your arms down, not folded. I'd like you to close your eyes, and I'd like you to reflect, just really for about 20 or 30 seconds. And it's simple. Reflect on and think about a moment of significant learning. Okay, thank you. In a different setting, we might do it a little bit longer. Certainly maybe debrief it, discuss it, but very briefly, I just want you to kind of be conscious of a show of hands. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions and just have a quick look around at what people are indicating by raising their hands or not. So did anybody think back on a time in their lives when, let's say, friends, they were thinking of a loved one? Okay, so maybe 2 or 3. Did anyone think back and reflect about, say, for instance, an illness or a disease in a family setting? Okay, again, 2 or 3. Did anyone think about a particular travel experience, visiting somewhere, being involved in an overseas experience of some kind? Okay, 8, 9, 10 possibly. Did anyone think of, let's say, for instance, your first passionate kiss? Sean? Okay, not many. That's really unfortunate, folks, eh? What really I'm trying to get at, folks, is that it's unusual for anyone to probably think of, say, for instance, conjugating the verb avoir in secondary school. Or maybe you did. Did anyone think about, no? Oh, maybe, good man, well done. Things are going well, I think, yeah. Maybe plate tectonics. I'm not too sure what you've done in maths in secondary school. But what we know from learning is that the more emotional involvement, the more relevance, the more meaning attached to events, then the more that we learn. But it seems to be a case, very sadly, in education that we seem to avoid emotional content, avoid meaning, and possibly make things irrelevant. So just keep that in mind as I go to the next slide, if you don't mind. I'm not going on about Manchester United purposely, but this is important for me because I wouldn't ask you to do something and not do it myself. Theatre of Dreams, Old Trafford. Ticket here for that 11-year-old that you saw previously, but note bottom left-hand corner, guest. When I was 11, folks, it was a dream of mine to go to Old Trafford. My parents were not well off, not by any stretch of the imagination. We'd never gone on holidays. They decided to save up, brilliant, bring the young guy over to Old Trafford. No tickets, no internet at that stage, certainly not for us anyway, in fact, no phone. So we go over to Old Trafford without a ticket for the game. Very sadly, there was no tickets available. Here's this 11-year-old crushed. Oh my God, my world caved in. Going to Manchester United, not being able to get a ticket. So of course my father and mother, who as generous as they were, tried to kind of make amends, bring me to the souvenir shop, get him a cap, which you saw me wear in the previous photograph, get him a scarf, get him a badge or something. This is shocking. We can't go to the game on Saturday. I still remember it really well. We're playing Coventry. We, you know, us, all of us. Playing Coventry, and Jesper Olsen, the former guy that you saw, scored 2 goals. We won 10 games in a row, and even during Alex Ferguson's era, that's not to be repeated. Why I'm mentioning that is we went into the souvenir shop and met Matt Busby. Now, for those who don't know who Matt Busby is, he's maybe even more famous from a Man United point of view than Alex Ferguson. What's really important is that I was wearing that gear. So I had a Man United cap, Man United scarf, Man United badge, and of course he's asking me, who do you support? I'm telling him, he's asking me, are you going to the game at the weekend? No, I can't go to the game. Why? You know, tickets are sold out. He explained, well, that's unfortunate. You need to get them in advance, especially if we're on a good run. We've won 10 games in a row. Maybe you should have thought of that. Absolutely. He's right, of course. We left, should say as well, he asked me, was I playing football? And I said, I was, but badly. He told me to stick at it, you know, keep up the good work, nice words of encouragement, and off we went. He asked us, though, what hotel were we staying in. About an hour later, a courier arrived at the door with tickets for me, my mum, my dad, with guest written on them, but it was the note attached to the tickets that made sense. It was like, enjoy the game, but because without supporters, Man United are nothing. Now, I know that may seem kind of like emotional after last night's performance and all the rest of it, but for me, experiential learning, I don't need necessarily teachers. A little bit like what Alan was saying earlier on. An awful lot of things that we've forgotten about learning are almost intuitive. We don't necessarily need people to teach us these things. We need to be reminded, possibly. And that was certainly a moment of significant learning for me, which I'll come back to. So if you don't mind, just going on to the next one. Experiential learning. Is it learning by doing? If it was, we'd have lots of wise people. Why? Because we've got very busy people. But busy doesn't mean learning. And what you've got, if you like, and this is based on lots of theories that you will know maybe inside out. Plan, act, evaluate and reflect, and it's based on cycles of experiential learning. It's based on learning styles. It's based on all sorts, but very much simplified. And what you've got is basically the idea that if you want to maximize any learning opportunity in terms of experience, you need to go through the 4 different quadrants. It's not good enough just to plan or act, plan and act, because you continually make the same mistakes over and over and over, and things don't change. But at the heart of learning is the idea of change. And so what's important in terms of learning is to go below the line, evaluate and reflect. And I wonder whether or not within education we spend enough time actually looking at, evaluating and reflecting as practitioners, as professionals on what we do. I would say that no, we don't spend enough time doing it, that we're very busy planning and acting. And I think you could look at present political, economic situations and talk about those as well, that we seem to kind of repeat things over and over, rather than necessarily changing things, like transformation I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the gradual stuff that seems to make people kind of feel okay about themselves. I'm talking about change, but on a kind of exponential way, if you like. So what's important in relation to this is to start kind of encouraging people to look below the line. So experiential learning isn't necessarily just learning by doing, although that's very valuable. I think it's a little bit deeper than that, it goes a little bit further. If you don't mind, I'm just going to focus on the adult side of things. This is all jargon, don't worry about it, but what's key is that when we talk, and people have mentioned it already, the notion of pedagogy, which oftentimes is associated with children. You've got andragogy, the whole notion of that Malcolm Knowles put forward, or made more famous, if you like. The idea of engaging people, or adults particularly, in education, but doing it through their experience, that the centrality and the importance of experience was key if it was to be made emotional, meaning and relevant. Now the important thing is if we are to make it effective. I have a question mark over that completely in terms of education. To be honest, I think it's structured in a way to make it ineffective, emotionless or irrelevant. And of course you can disagree with that, and that's your own prerogative. I would challenge that view. So I think the centrality of participation and involvement is key. Evidence. You should be asking about evidence. I've got plenty. 2 pieces of research I was personally involved in, one of them an inquiry into the effectiveness of a range of approaches used in development education projects in Ireland. The case study was done in an organisation that I'm very proud to be involved in, Development Perspectives. The more emotionally people are engaged in a particular topic, the more they learn. It's quite simple actually, not complicated, not complex. The more they're involved, the more they get from it. The more meaning attached, the more they get from it. The more directly relevant it is, the more they get from it. Strangely enough, it's to be repeated nearly everywhere. Pedagogy of the oppressors. I compared and looked at outcomes for MA students in Dublin City University, University College Dublin and Kimmage Development Studies Centre. And why I'm mentioning it is not to be critical of any two of them, but you can make your own minds up as to whether or not that's the case. But when you ask students who are graduates of these programs what worked, why did it work, what did you think of the program, strangely enough, the more emotionally involved, the more meaningful, the more relevant, worked for them. But strangely enough, that's the college that gets least funding. That's the college that gets least support. Why? They're proving they are more effective. They are proving they are more relevant. They are proving they are more meaningful. So we'll fund who then? Unfortunately, Kimmage Development Studies Centre have had lots of cuts over the last few years, and I think that's disappointing because they're proving that they're effective. Can I just move on, if you don't mind, to the next slide? A couple of big challenges for all of us if we're interested in looking at kind of experiential learning. Mainstreaming is very important in terms of development education, and I wonder why. And I'm not criticising again formal education, but I do think we need to change formal education if it's to become more effective. How valuable is mainstreaming? Look at literacy levels, look at the ability to speak languages, maths, problem solving, we're not great at. I think that we could focus an awful lot more at the skill element of teachers rather than including development education in a system that, quite frankly, I think leaves a lot to be desired. I'm not questioning the value of formal education. What I'm questioning is the effectiveness of it. I think that putting it into something that doesn't necessarily work all the time doesn't necessarily make an awful lot of sense. What I'd be more interested in is equipping and upscaling, if you like, those who are engaged in that area to bring about some changes. Volunteering, and again, this is going to maybe upset some people, sorry, but you know yourselves, development education, you're not in the business of winning friends. I have got a kind of an issue with the whole notion of volunteering in an overseas context. I think the language needs to change. I think we need to start looking at the focus, instead of being volunteering in a development context, and it's usually, let's face it, in an overseas context, like Elaine was mentioning earlier on, maybe in Sudan, maybe in Tanzania, maybe in wherever. Why don't we look at the idea of, as I say here, experiential learning in a development education context? It's much more about learning and sharing rather than the whole notion of helping, because to be quite honest, and many of the groups that I go overseas with, they're not really in a position to help anybody. In fact, they're a hindrance more than a help quite often. But they learn a huge amount, and that I think is crucially important. And I'm not, again, understating the value of volunteering, but I'm questioning its effectiveness, and I think we should change focus. Experiential learning in a development education focus. I think that would bring about a change in values, if you like. Again, moving away from this us and them. Let's move away from aid debates. Let's stop talking about aid. Let's start talking about possibilities of justice, much more in the fabric of what we do. Less about charity, less about much more about developing cooperation, cooperating together, partnership, us and them. Not less than or more than or modernising, because it gives away certain values that may underpin a lot of our action. And in terms of reciprocal just learning opportunities, I think it's important to reciprocate the process. Just the last slide or two. Alignment. This is a stick exercise. Many of you know it. Lowering the stick. Experiential learning is in line with theories like multiple intelligences, people working together from across communities, problem solving together. Critical thinking theories are in line with this side of stuff. It's not just out on its own. And sorry, last but not least, the action and reflection component. Action is crucial in development education. Without it, it's development studies. Nothing wrong with that, but then let's just do that rather than seriously look at the action side of things, because that's where the change comes from if you look at the cycle of experiential learning. Remove the action component and we have a variation of development studies. And very last slide, unlocking potential. Given the scale of what we know of the challenges that face humanity, I think it's really about time that we unlock the human potential that so far is going unlocked, absolutely unlocked. And if you look at what Colin Beard and Wilson do about the combination lock theory of experiential learning, essentially what they're saying is stop doing the same things twice and expect different results. It's insane. Change what we're doing, but radically change what we're doing, because it will change society as we know it. So in terms of changing it, why not then, if we are looking for serious change, why not embrace the possibility of looking at the power of experiential learning? Cheers, folks.